Hey, horror fans. Hope you're all doing well. Board now back with Rachel Macdonald, and on this very special video, we go back to another top 10 list. This is something we do every now and again, as often as possible, and we're returning to the film list this month and the horror themed list. So it's going to be top 10 horror movie kills, and for anybody who follows our regular horror movie podcasts where we talk about horror movies, then you kind of know then this is right up our street. This is perfect for us to be doing this sort of a list. On a related note, you can also find our top 10 horror villains, which we did that back in October around about Halloween. So that's quite a good tie-in, that one to watch alongside with this one. We don't do combined lists because that would be almost impossible to agree on, I would say. I know we were talking off air, and I think we both predicted at least one of the same, maybe two. So that will be interesting to take note of. It's again a very wide open thing. So as you're watching us on this video, have a think of yours and let us know what your top 10 list would be in the comments below. So just a couple of questions. First of all, without obviously giving away any of your entries, but what do you tend to look for, like in a good horror movie kill? Do you have a set sort of thing that draws you into a good kill?
So for me, like looking at my list, it's actually quite varied. So there can be several factors that go into a good kill for me. I like a good lead up. I think if a kill has a good lead up, that can really emphasize that the horror of what's going on. Creative kills that use items that maybe you don't think of to murder someone with. Anyone can get a knife or a machete, but someone that has like maybe an object that you don't normally use to kill
Sure.
someone with. Maybe something that's really particularly, intense or out of nowhere, like brutal. So I think it goes to me for atmosphere, creativity, and intensity. I've got a couple on my list that it's about the actual method of the kill and like the actual bad guy and what they actually do and how they actually kill. So it can be a very thing. And I think the beauty of the horror genre is because there are so many subgenres within the genre, you have so much to choose from when it comes to favorite kills. You really can go from one extreme to the other. So you might have some kills that you like because they're so gory and they're so well done. You might have some that you like just because the atmosphere is so good, or the circumstances surrounding the kills are like really interesting. But I think, yeah, the top of my list would be atmosphere, creativity, and intensity of the scenes. What about you? What makes a good kill for you? What do you look for?
I was thinking similar things, really. I think what's funny is a lot of times I like a good, like, drawn out sort of scene where it like builds the atmosphere and
Mm.
you kind of told a story in a way with the kill. And similar to what you said, because obviously there are staples of horror movies, and in many ways, some of like these slasher weapons we see and like good old fashioned knife or whatever, they
Mm.
never really go out of fashion, and they
No.
never really get old. But as time goes on and you've just had so many different kills, so many different horror movies, you definitely need to mix it up a bit and do some different things. So it's one of those things where it's a balance, because probably without giving away anything just yet, a lot on my list are quite simple kills
Mm.
in just what they're actually doing, like the way they kill them. But at the same time, it's to do with the drama and the tension and the build up and the way it's shot. So I think it's that those sort of opposites in a way that appeal quite a lot, where you either go for like a good old school classic, but it's so well directed and it's so effective, then it works really well. Or you go for something a bit more creative, a bit more wacky, a bit more sort of elaborate, which definitely I think there's a couple on my list that would fit into that category. So
Mm.
I definitely like some creative kills, same as you, a combination of the two. So yeah, this should be a really interesting list. I think once again
Yeah,
we could go all over the place on this one.
I think so. Yes.
Pick. And I know you instantly had quite a lot of yours done, didn't you? Like you had 6 or
Yes,
7
mine
quite
was
early.
actually really easy to
Yeah.
do. It was easy for me to rattle mine off, whereas I know that you had, like, you got to like 7 and were kind of struggling a little bit with your last 3.
Yeah, I was still working on it today, and then even when I had 10, I was deciding on the order, and I think I kept the list the same mostly just for like contrast and variety. So, okay, I think we should make a start. So you can go first. What's your number 10?
So my number 10 comes from a movie that I don't think you have seen. My number 10 is the opening scene of The Woman in Black from 2010 with Daniel Radcliffe. So this scene opens with the death of 3 young girls. We open on a very atmospheric, old Victorian kind of tea party. There's eerie music, and these 3 girls are very innocently playing with their dolls, and then they all 3 stand up, and in perfect and very creepy unison, they walk to the window, open the window, and all 3 of them simultaneously jump. Now, it looks like it's a suicide, but once you get into the movie and you find out who the woman in black is and what her motive is, we get a flashback to this scene, and we see that she's actually present in the scene. She's standing in the corner, and she is making the girls jump. And the reason I love this so much is it goes back to that atmosphere thing that I was talking about. It is the creepiest and one of the most unsettling opening scenes I've seen in a movie. I think whenever horror movies get children involved, it always is a little bit more intense. We're used to seeing adults and teenagers be stupid and run around and get killed, and it doesn't affect you as badly. But when you have someone as innocent as a child dying in such a horrifying way, it's really impactful. So I have always loved that opening scene. The music is beautiful. It's kind of that eerie Victorian kind of gothic horror, tinkling kind of, music box music. It's filmed in this beautiful slow motion. You see the girls walking in slow motion. You see their feet crushing like a doll's head in a teacup, so that you know that there's something very unsettling. And then just the shot of the 3 of them opening the windows and just jumping, and then you hear the thud and you hear the screams and the wails of like everyone who's hearing them. And then, like I said, once we get into the movie and we see that the woman in black is actually taking children and killing children, without giving too much of the plot away, we get a flashback to that scene, and you see her in the corner, and she is a terrifying villain. For one, her look and her aesthetic is really creepy, and to see her kind of just in the background there pushing these girls, obviously psychically, to kill themselves, it is incredibly creepy and incredibly unsettling. So that opening scene, if anyone gets the chance, if you ever like just watch the opening scene of this movie, like if you don't watch the rest of the movie, at least watch this scene. It is unsettling, it is just atmospheric and all sorts of wrong, and it gets the number 10 place on my list. So that's what I'm kicking the list off with.
Good stuff, yeah, and obviously important with it being the opening scene to sort of set the mood. Yeah, I haven't seen this one. I saw the director's previous film, The Eden Lake, which is a
Oh, that one's
very
intense.
disturbing film. Yeah,
Very disturbing.
the
That's the one with
ending.
Michael Fassbender, isn't it? And there's
Yeah, Kelly
yeah,
Riley.
yes, and they get stuck in the woods with
Yeah.
that gang that end up. Yes, that one is very
I
intense.
mean, it is a good film, but it's very bleak at times, very
Yes.
disturbing.
The
So
Woman
yeah,
in Black is similar. Very bleak film,
okay,
very eerie, creepy, atmospheric film,
that was his
and really just
previous
kicks it off
film.
with that opening death scene. It's
Okay.
fantastic. Mhm.
Needless to say, my number 10 is very different to that. My number 10, and I think obviously this is from a franchise that you like quite a bit. So I'm dipping into the Final Destination franchise here. And I
Nice.
wonder if I say then the kill comes from Final Destination 3, if you can guess which kill it is. If
No, because that's one that I actually
you
haven't
haven't
seen.
seen it,
Oh,
okay.
no, I do know. Are you okay? I'm gonna guess, but then you correct me. Are you going with the tanning bed scene?
I am indeed the tanning
Yes,
bed scene.
very.
So, okay, but I'm glad Rachel approves. I wasn't sure if I might get some shit from some people.
No, that's a great scene.
It's a great scene, yeah. I mean, it's a very creative kill. It's visually, it's very well done, very well shot. I mean, it is a little bit on the goofy side and a bit more cheesy than some, but yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I think my first couple of entries might have a bit of that, but it's kind of hilarious because just to set the scene, you've got these two attractive girls getting on like a tanning bed, and they're both like listening to the same song, and it's like that Love Roller Coaster song. And believe me, because I've been watching the scene, I've had that in my head all day today. But it's just so comical, like these two girls on this bed, bopping along to that and singing and getting into it. And obviously, you slowly have the change in tone of the scene. And like a lot of kills in the Final Destination franchise, it's really sort of elaborate and it goes places. And it sort of starts at one point where you would think, well, how can there possibly be a death at the end of this? And slowly just builds. It's like this smallest of things where it's like ice water that's come from like a slushy cup, like a drink, and that slowly starts things off. That slowly starts dripping and moving towards, like the sort of like the tanning beds and gets in the
Yeah,
machine
in
and
typical
starts
Final
eating.
Destination.
And at
Yeah.
one point, one of them thinks, "Yeah, I've actually put this on too high," sort of thing. But you get all this elaborate stuff where things are like knocking into each other. Like at one point, I think it's like the door knocks into the plant or something, and it's the plant which then lands onto
hmm
the tanning bed. So it's
Yep.
actually that which stops them from being able to escape. And it's just little details like that that are really sort of funny, but really work anyway if you understand like the premise of the franchise. Also, I think when you get to part three, you have to really start doing adventurous and things and
Yes.
start
Yes.
mixing it up. And obviously, as the tension builds, it's a really effective death because they're frantically trying to get out,
Yeah.
screaming, heavy breathing. I do actually like a lot of the visual because actually them being in tanning beds and like the infrared style look of it,
hmm
that just actually looks really cool for like a horror death scene. And eventually you
Yeah.
sort of get like this overhead sort of thing, the glass event, because obviously it starts heating up more and more, and it gets set on fire and the glass like caves in on them and they actually literally get fried, their faces get
Yeah.
really, it's actually really graphic and very well done. So it's sort of a good mix of like comedic, sort of quite sort of cheesy, but also really effective, really sort of grueling, and there's attention to it as well. It's visually,
Mm.
I think it looks really cool.
That's a great choice. I think one of the best things about the Final Destination movies is not only the creativity, but also the build up. It's like you said, you get to see the chain of events. So you see the water dripping, then you see the plant fall over, then you see this, and then you see that. And you have that in the first movie and in the second movie. And I think it's just a great cause and effect that they show. So the tanning bed scene, definitely iconic. Solid choice for number 10. I love it. Plus anything from the Final Destination franchises in my mind. So that's very
Okay.
cool. All right, so my number nine. Now I don't know if I'm cheating with this one because this my number nine is not a singular death; it's a mass death, and I actually have a couple of these on my list. But my number nine is the end party massacre from The Rage Carrie 2. Now, The Rage Carrie 2 is one of my guilty pleasure movies. I actually really love it. It's not the greatest sequel, but if you view it as kind of a standalone movie, it's good fun. And similarly to Carrie, it has the whole build up of this girl with telekinesis till we get to a big showdown at the end when she goes nuts. Now, in this one, they don't dump pig's blood on her. Instead, they invite her to a party where they humiliate her, taunt her about her best friend's death. The protagonist's name is Rachel. So they taunt her about her best friend's suicide, which happens earlier in the film, and they make her believe that her love interest was only sleeping with her to score points in like this book that they keep track of like all the girls that they've had sex with. It's really gross. And of course, she flips out And she ends up, very much like the first movie, creating a whole massacre. Now, what's very cool in this one is there's a great build up to it. The scene that's building up to it is full of tension as you see her like thrown from football player to football player as they're mocking her. You can see that she's getting more and more upset. Now, we don't have the pig's blood for the visual. So in this one, what they do is Rachel has a tattoo on her arm of a heart with veins coming out. And as she gets angrier, the heart starts to beat, and people notice that it's actually beating on her arm. And then the veins start to grow, and they grow all over her face and all down her arm. So she ends up looking kind of like Dark Willow, kind of has that kind of look. And
All right.
then, very similarly to the first film, she goes stock still, her eyes go wide, and this bloody massacre just erupts. We have fire, we have people being skewered with like fishing poles, we have CDs. She uses a stack of CDs as a weapon and slits people's throats. There's a great part where she makes a girl's glasses shatter into her eyes and her eyeballs explode. It's just a fantastic like 10 minutes of just pure bloody mayhem. People running, people screaming, and she has that very silent, kind of eeriness that Sissy Spacek has, where she just kind of walks through the carnage, killing as she goes. And it's just such a great culmination. Again, very similar to the original, of this whole movie has been building to this fantastic kill scene at the end. And we get this really great payoff where we get to see all of the horrible characters get killed in these god-awful ways. One guy gets a flare gun to the nuts, another one gets drowned in like a swimming pool when the cover goes over, and it ends quite tragically because her love interest does end up coming to the party and seeing what's going on and ends up convincing her that it was real, that what they had was real, and she, sacrifices herself to save him, and she dies in the end. But it's such a great explosion of a scene, and I feel like it actually almost lives up to the original in terms of carnage and eeriness and atmosphere and just the fear of being trapped in this house with this psycho who's just gone crazy and is killing everyone in sight, and there's no escape. And it's fantastic. It's got all the gore and, fun and kind of terror that you want from like a Carrie film, and it's fantastic. So that's my number 9, The Party Massacre from the Rage Carrie 2.
Okay, I've not seen it again. I would need to
Mhm.
see that really to see how that plays out. But it sounds like it could be quite a fun sort of scene. So my number 9, I'm actually going back to another franchise. This time it's Friday the 13th franchise, and
Ah.
I've actually gone quite deep now. I don't think I think I've seen. I'm trying to think if I've seen the film. I'm pretty sure I've seen it because I'm familiar with the death, but it's whether I've actually. But if I say so, first of all, get a load of the title because it's Friday the 13th, 7, The New Blood. So
Oh
the
gosh.
irony of that, you're 7 films in and you're calling it The New Blood. Like, okay,
Yeah.
there's that. Pretty dumb title for a
Yeah.
start. But if I say it's the sleeping bag death, do you know the one I mean?
Yes, I
Yeah,
absolutely know the one you mean.
yeah, again, I think this is quite iconic. I think a lot of fans, even if they haven't seen the actual movie, would probably know this, probably seen it online. So just to give it a bit of a setup, you've got initially, I mean, it's Jane's death in particular. She's the one who ends up on the end of this, and it's her boyfriend Dan who originally goes because they're getting all romantic under the stars in the sleeping bag. He goes off to get some firewood. He's brutally killed by Jason. It's worth saying this is hockey mask Jason as well. They've gotten to that stage,
Yeah.
and for many people, that is the best Jason, and obviously the Kane Harder Jason. So just to set that off, he's gone for firewood. He's been killed. So Jason comes back with firewood. Actually pretends to be the boyfriend. He does that old sort of thing because he's like, sort of setting up the fire and stuff with the wood outside, and she's waiting for him. And you get this line from her: "Come on, you big hunk of a man, come and get me." So you've got one of those where she basically thinks it's her boyfriend. So
Oh
suspense sort
man.
of builds. As I said, he's putting because he's putting the wood on the fire. So he is like pretending he's the actual boyfriend, just playing with her. And suddenly, as she starts to get like more frantic and irritated, and where are you sort of thing, he like rips into the back of the tent, and he like literally grabs the sleeping bag and drags her out. So you see the sort of strength of him. Yeah, he starts whipping it about. She starts screaming and squirming. So you've got that sort of struggle, which makes it quite. I mean, it's sort of quite funny and goofy, but it's also quite good seeing her sort of squirming in this sleeping bag trying to get out. But I just give it points for like unpredictability and creativity, because when you first see that kill, you would never guess what he's going to do next. You would never guess that he's just going to sling the sleeping bag with her in against a tree and just kill her like that. It's just like the brute force of that. You would just assume he's just going to like use his axe or something on her, or just something like that. But no, he was pretty creative, old Jason, with that one, because he literally whips it against the tree, and it happens very fast. Like it suddenly cuts to like her face all bloodied, and she instantly dies, as you would. So it's a little bit on the goofy side, but it's definitely fun and entertaining, and it looks good, like the effect of it, and sort of does show Jason off as being like a badass. And I do get a kick out of her like struggling in the sleeping bag, squirming, trying to get away. So yeah, again, a bit more of a comedic one for my number nine, but the sleeping bag death.
Very nice. I actually haven't seen that Friday the 13th, but I've seen that scene. And I remember watching the Eli Roth's History of Horror, or maybe it was Behind the Monsters, but one of the shows, and the guy who was playing Jason at that time, he said that that is actually his favorite Jason kill as well. So
Yeah.
that's a very popular one. I got it. And like you said, it definitely shows the sheer strength of Jason, that he like literally picks up this sleeping bag and is like smacking it around. So definitely a good choice. All right. So my number 8 is linked to my number 9, because for number 8 I have the Prom Massacre from Carrie, which I talked about when we were doing our top 10 favorite villains, because I listed Carrie as one of my favorite villains. The Prom Massacre is honestly one of my favorite scenes in any horror movie ever. It is such a perfect scene. It is so well done. It is so well directed. And I think in particular, the build up to this scene is so good. We've spoken about this before, but Carrie can actually be quite a sad movie, because Carrie herself is so picked on and so downtrodden. And when you see her at the prom and she's smiling and she's dancing and she's having a good time, and then she gets crowned prom queen, and you know what's coming. You know that pig's blood is going to fall on her, and you know that as soon as that happens, all hell is going to break loose. And I think everything about the scene, from Sissy Spacek's like wide-eyed performance, so the blood drops on her head, and you have that repeating of her mother doing the "they're all going to laugh at you," which really amplifies what it's like in her head and what she thinks of herself and how the people see her. And I just love how you see the switch from her, from being like devastated and humiliated, to just the switch that flicks, and all of a sudden you can see there's murder in her eyes. She looks at all the doors like quickly, and they all slam shut, and you have that creepy score that builds up. And then of course you have the hose going and the fire starting and the people screaming. The teacher, the gym coach who actually helped her, gets a horrifying death where she almost gets like vivisected and by like the scoreboard. And you have everyone running. And then of course you have Sissy Spacek, that iconic image of her just drenched in blood, doing that slow walk down the stairs through the massacre, through all the horror that she's created. I think that scene, when I first watched Carrie, like really unnerved me. I found it to be like such a scary and horrifying scene for like everyone, you know. I felt bad for everyone in that scene. Like everyone is panicking, screaming and running, and Carrie herself is not necessarily doing this out of like evilness, but more just because she's a very traumatized young girl who has this intense power inside of her that when she gets set off, it's almost like she can't control it. And I just think it's such a brilliant payoff to the entire movie and just such a fun scene. There's so many great depths in that scene, so many moments of like carnage. I love when she's left the prom and Chris and her boyfriend try to run her over and they go screaming up to her, and at the very last minute she just turns her head and the car just goes flying. The
Yeah.
whole sequence at the end is just fantastic. So like I said, one of my favorite scenes from any horror movie in general, but just a great scene for as far as the carnage and the kills go, and seeing the damage that Carrie can actually do and how powerful she actually is when you tap into that kind of raw humiliation and anger and grief that she has in that scene. So that is my number 8, the Prom Massacre from Carrie.
Yeah, great choice and really good choice. Really strong scene. The perfect sort of ending, really, to that movie.
Mm.
It's definitely a classic. As I said, I was lucky enough to see that film on the big screen a
That's
couple of years
amazing. I would
ago.
love to see Carrie on the big screen. I think
Yeah,
that would be so good.
so that was a great experience, and obviously we'll definitely do those at some
Yes,
point. I mean, there's a
yes.
few to do, definitely.
Yes,
So
there are. There's a few different
a
remakes.
couple of
So,
remakes, yeah. So
mm.
we'll definitely do all of them at some point. Now that'll make for some good reviews. So yeah, I'm intrigued by the rest of your list now because that's obviously reasonably low. So it'll be interesting, but iconic scene without a doubt. So my number 8 actually links up quite well with my number 9 because it's from again one of the big like horror franchises involving one of the big slasher villains, and again it's this guy getting a little bit creative. So when we did this movie, it divided us. You weren't so keen on it. I actually liked it quite a bit. It comes
Okay.
from Halloween 4, The
I had a feel.
Return of Michael Myers. You
I
probably know where
know,
I'm
I
going.
know, I do. But you say it, I'll give you the
1980.
honest.
There's actually a few good kills in that, or at least a couple. But the one I've gone with is definitely poor old Kelly's death, the impaled. She gets
On the
impaled by the
shotgun.
rifle, which is
Yeah.
absolutely glorious. It's so again, it's similar to the sleeping bag in the sense that when he's got the shotgun, you think, well, he's just going to shoot her, just and
Yes.
that'll be it. And the last thing you imagine he's actually going to do is like actually impale the poor girl. So it's a really creative choice. It looks good the way it's shot, like the sound of it sort of going into her is really distinct. But it's also the setup for it, which is really nicely done because you've got the fireplace. It's sort of all cozy. It sort of feels like it's this intimate, like innocent sort of family type setting because the sort of house they're in is quite sort of old fashioned and innocent as well. And yeah, obviously the lead into the scene is that he's in the rocking chair, he being Michael, and he's actually pretending to be like the dead cop. So he actually
Mm.
tricks poor Kelly. So the way that shot, where you just get the back of him, and at first you sort of think you don't know that it's Michael. So that's quite well done. The fire
Mm.
setting, sort of sparkling in the background is really good stuff. And then obviously the reveal where she sees him and the shock. Really good kill. But I tell you what, as well, where I sort of actually feel a bit bad for Kelly because we discussed it when we did the film because she is not the most sympathetic character, let's face
No.
it. But it's sort of the irony that then it's probably the one decent act she's done the whole movie to actually bring this cop, some cocoa, says, oh, you're
Yeah.
on duty. I thought you might want some cocoa. And it backfires on the poor girl. She ends up dead because of it. There's just some cruel irony about that. So it's the
Hmm.
best kill of the movie, and it might be an unpopular opinion, but I think it could be up there for best kill of the franchise.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Certainly one of them. I mean, obviously, I don't want to give too much away. Obviously, the kills that they did in the original movie were quite different because it was obviously a bit of a different sort of film, and they obviously, I'm guessing, would have had a lower budget. But I'd certainly say one of my favourite kills from that franchise. I'm not necessarily going to commit to it being my favourite, but I do enjoy that one. So that's, the Kelly gets impaled by the rifle.
Very nice.
1988.
We are quite divided about that film because you definitely like it a lot more than I do. And I will admit, the first time I watched it, I found the rifle scene a little cheesy, but I do understand where you're coming from. It is quite creative.
Yeah.
And like you said, like you expect him to shoot her, but then he like stabs her. So it's like, oh, okay. So we're being creative with the rifle. We're trying some different things. Good on you, Michael, so definitely good. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say it's the best kill in the Halloween franchise, but it's definitely one of the better ones. And it is one of the better ones in that movie, I will say. Very nice choice. But yes, as soon as you said it was like we had disagreement, it was Halloween 4, I was like, oh, I know which one you're gonna go with. Well, my next one comes from not a franchise, but a trilogy that we reviewed. So my number 7 is The Berman Sisters Slaughtered in Fear Street, Part 2, 1978. So this is the final death scene in that movie. Now, 1978, I love the entire Fear Street trilogy. 1994 is my favorite, but I do love 1978 for its kind of Friday the 13th vibe, its camp vibe. And the Berman sisters are our final girls, so to speak, Cindy and Ziggy. And of course, they're very opposite. The whole movie, they've, been clashing. But towards the end of the movie, they think that they can end the curse of Seraphia, and they go to the hanging tree to find her body to reunite the hand with the body. But they find that the body isn't there. And as they're there under the hanging tree, because Ziggy has bled on the bones of Seraphia, or at least at this point, this is what we're led to believe, her henchmen are coming after them. Now, we've seen these henchmen in the original film. So we have the Nightwing Killer, which is the killer there. We have the Milkman. We have Ruby Lane. We have all of the psycho killers coming. And the Berman sisters, their death is so violent. It is so incredibly violent. It is so, I was really surprised at how violent their deaths were. Cindy basically gets an axe to the chest several times over, whereas Ziggy is brutally stabbed by the really creepy Milkman. Like, the Milkman is like the one shady side killer that you're like, okay, even without the curse, you are going to become a killer. Like, you just have that look. And I think that their death is not only horrifying in the violence of it, like, it's a really violent death, and the girls are screaming, and there's blood splattering everywhere. Visually, it's a great death. It's also an incredibly tragic death because these two sisters have been at odds this whole movie. They've been on opposite sides. They've been clashing and fighting, and they've reconciled in the end. And Cindy is wanting, she's trying to say, leave my sister alone, let my sister live. I'll give you anything, Seraphia, just leave my sister be. And the tragedy of it is they watch each other die. And it's so tragic, but also kind of beautiful in that as they're dying, they're saying to each other, nothing will ever tear us apart now. We'll be together. Even if it's in death, we will still be together now. And then, of course, you have the reveal that Ziggy actually survived because Nick Good was able to revive her. And then you have her survivor's guilt. But just everything about that scene, the build-up, the score is fantastic. And a good score in a kill scene can really elevate the scene, when you've got good music. You've got the slow motion of the girls being stabbed and axed and gutted, and it's pretty much everything that you would want in a horror movie, but it's also got that tragedy to it. So while you're horrified, you're also really sad because these two sisters are dying together in this horrifying way. And then you have that beautiful shot of where the camera zooms out and you just see the two of them lying there with their arms outstretched to each other. Even in death, they're reaching for each other and trying to make sure that no one separates them again. So if you add, the gore, the violence, the tragedy, the music, the characterization, everything just goes into making this such a great scene and such a great climax to that film. And so that's why it is number 7 on my list. The Berman sisters get slaughtered in Fear Street Part 2, 1978. Number 7.
Very, very good choice. Yeah, even though I've only seen that film once, I obviously remember that scene. It is a standout, and that we agreed when we did review them. Really, that was the pick of the 3 movies, and just the way that scene is shot, and obviously very violent, very grueling. I like the sort of slow motion, like camera work during it. It's nicely done, and obviously the fact that they managed to do that reveal as well within that scene is really,
that was really good.
Satisfying as well. It does a good job of working that into it. So yeah, really, really good end sort of kill to that movie. Okay.
Yeah.
So my number 7. I've been pretty predictable so far, but the predictability stops now, Rachel, because I don't know if you would either have heard of this movie. So the next kill comes from a movie called House, and no, it's not the 1980s House, the American movies. It's the Japanese film House from 1977. So have you heard of this?
No, I have not. So do tell.
Or Hasu, as you would say in Japan. So this is like a rediscovered, like sort of cult classic, which has been like sort of, rediscovered over the last few years and given a bit of a reissue. So it's one of those where it's over time it's like gained a cult reputation, and it's definitely one of those films you either love or hate. It's a bit like when David Lynch goes full-blown Lynch, where you'll watch it and you'll either just be so enraptured by it and so caught up in how bizarre, weird, beautiful it is, or you'll just hate it. You'll just think it's the most tedious thing. I don't think there will be any in between. So it's definitely one we should do on the show. But you're sort of getting into like the macabre, strange, surreal sort of territory with this film. It's kind of hard to do a setup, but I'll just talk about this kill. I mean, the basic setup you've got a group of girls, like school girls, and they're on like a summer vacation, and most of the film is set in like this one house. It's like one of theirs like relatives, like grandma or something house, and it, at its basic core, it is like a haunted house style movie, but there's all sorts of weird shit going on in this house. But just to like say what the scene is. So a character called Melody, so bear that in mind. Melody gets devoured by a piano. So Melody
gets devoured.
Okay,
I'm very interested to find out how this happened.
So you've got to see the scene. So as I said, it's all the things I said. It's sort of surreal, it's stylish, it's very slapstick, like the whole process of her fighting to get out of the piano as it's like trying to like swallow her and kill her. It's sort of very cartoonish and bizarre, and it's sort of like the most realistic version of that scene you can do, but at the same time it just feels completely out of whack as well, like the way they use the graphics, and as well, like it sort of looks a bit cheesy, but at the same time the scene is so well done and so bizarre and so satisfying to watch. Just the struggle of her, again, I think macabre and slapstick is quite a good word for this, just the weirdness of her trying to fight this piano and trying to get out. And I think, as I said, Melody's her name, so I think there's definitely a double meaning there. But it does come across as like a very animated style type scene, and as I said, a real sort of struggle. It feels quite fantastical. It feels really playful. But just to add to it is at the end when she's finally being devoured completely. she actually gets like a perverse sort of thrill out of it. Like you actually see her face, being, and she actually looks pleasured. And I wondered if that's some sort of metaphor for like music or something, and being
Music,
pleasured.
yeah.
It's like, yeah, she just has a line like, "Oh my, that's like sweet," or something along that line. Like you get a close up of her face. So at the very end,
Oh,
before she's killed, yeah, she actually looks like all pleasurable, basically. So it's an absolute bonkers and fun and, as I said, disturbing scene. All these things all in one, and it's just the perfect set piece, I think, which sums up that sort of cult movie. So that's once again Melody developed by a piano from House Hasu 1977, and
okay.
we'll
Well, I'm
definitely do it one day.
yes, I think we're definitely going to have to do that because now I am very curious and probably going to go and Google this after this. So
Yeah.
very, very unique, very interesting choice. I like it, and it's given me something to go and have a look at. So
Yeah.
very cool. Okay, now I'm going to be a little bit predictable because once I say the title of this movie, I think you know exactly which scene I'm going to be referring to. So my number six, we're now at number six, is from a movie that we reviewed around Christmas time. My number six is from Black Christmas, 1974. Yes, the original Black Christmas. Do you know which scene I'm referring to?
If I had to guess, I would say you're going for the Barb death scene,
Yes.
with the
Bob
Christmas.
dies to Christmas carols is my
That's it.
number six.
That's the one.
So Black Christmas, one of my favorite horror films, such a great atmospheric film, one of the original slashers. And we talked about this in our review, but one of the reasons that Black Christmas is so effective is that they take something that's supposed to be filled with joy, Christmas, and make it sinister. And I think that Barb's death scene is the best example of that. So, of course, everyone, the setup to Black Christmas is the sorority sisters. There's a creeper in their house who's making creepy ass phone calls and slowly killing them one by one. The lead up to Barb's death is our main final girl, Jess. There's a knock at the door. She goes to answer it, and there's this beautiful choir of children singing Christmas carols. I'm pretty sure it's Silent Night. And as they sing Silent Night, Barb, who has gone up to her room to sleep or possibly pass out because she's a bit of a drunk, is killed with, of all things, Christmas ornaments, these beautiful, sparkly, very sharp Christmas ornaments, while these children sing Christmas carols. It's very well directed. We don't actually see much of the violence. We see the stabbing motion of the ornament. We see the blood on the ornament. We see Barb's hand. And this is all intercut with Jess smiling and watching these children sing. And of course, you have these angelic, childlike voices singing this beautiful Christmas carol while this girl is being horrifyingly murdered upstairs. And it's just such a great atmospheric scene. It has the creativity of, Christmas ornaments being used as the murder weapon, as opposed to, just a knife or a machete or, something very standard. So I like the creativity. And there's just something so unsettling and eerie about that scene, about a girl dying to Christmas carols, which are songs that are supposed to be happy and bright. It's like I was talking about just before with the Fear Street one. Music in a death scene can like really elevate a death scene, and the fact that they use a Christmas carol in that scene, and a Christmas carol like Silent Night, which is so haunting, it just really emphasizes the horror of what's going on in that bedroom. And like I said, I think the cinematography is really good. I think the fact that we don't actually see that much actually works better. There's nothing scarier than what you actually imagine in your own mind. And I just think everything about that scene, from the ornaments to the filming to the music to, the way it's juxtaposed of this really horrible thing happening to this really beautiful music. It's just a fantastic scene. It's such a great moment and such an iconic scene from such a great movie. So that's my number six. Barb dies to Christmas carols from Black Christmas.
Great choice. Yeah, it is a classic. We obviously talked a lot about that scene when we reviewed the film recently. So I think we're both big fans of the movie, and definitely as far as kills goes, that's the standout kill. I think we're both really big on that scene, the way it's directed and everything. So good choice. So for my number six, I'm sort of digging back into the classics for this one, and I've gone for a Freddy Krueger kill, so back to the classic slasher, and so it's one of the sequels. And if I say the punchline, I think you'll know where I'm going.
I think I already know what you're
You
going for,
already know,
but go
yeah, because
for
it's
it.
so well known. But it's welcome to prime
Welcome
time,
to prime time,
bitch.
bitch.
There you go.
Nice.
Yeah,
Very
absolutely.
nice.
Nightmare on Elm
From
Street.
Dream Warriors.
The Dream Warriors. It's an absolutely great scene. So it's him. He says the line and then basically smashes her head into like a television set. I think literally like propels her into
Yes,
it.
he literally like grabs her and like
Yeah.
into the TV.
Yeah, I think that makes it look even better than if he just sort of like
Mm-hmm.
dropped it on her or something.
Definitely, yeah.
The physicality of it, and
Mm.
but it's just the irony of like his punchline, his choice of punchline, because
Mhm.
you would think like it might come off as goofy in that, but it doesn't at all. It's like just Freddy like messing with someone because he knows that she wants to be like a TV presenter, like news presenter,
Yes.
something along those
Mm-hmm.
lines, isn't it? So
Yep.
it's a great gag on that level, but it's also just like Freddy just screwing with someone and
Just being
just
Freddy. Mm-hmm.
yeah, just adding a bit of an insult as he kills them. I mean, that's sort of really rubbing the salt in. It's really good stuff. It's like a good physical kill with that classic like one-liner which stands out. And obviously, we'll definitely do that movie at some point because we're
Yes.
definitely going to do the Nightmare films. It's one of those, isn't it? Very rarely do you get like a horror sequel that might be like a contender for as good as the original.
Yes.
In its own way, I think it does what a sequel needs to do is it expands on the original and it complements it, but it also does its own thing. So that's
Yes.
a great example of how to do a great horror sequel. But that's my choice for number 6. Well, it's a
Very
primetime
nice. I
bitch.
mean,
Never get
that
up.
line, it's iconic. It is so iconic, and it just makes the scene. And like you said, I think in the hands of a different actor or a different character, it would come across as cheesy. But Robert Englund is just brilliant and manages to always
Like,
deliver his lines so well. Definitely on board with that. Great choice. So we're moving into top 5 now. So we're in the top 5
yeah.
territory. So coming in at my number 5, this is another group massacre scene. Again, I'm cheating a little bit, but my number 5 is the opening ship party massacre from Ghost Ship. So have you seen Ghost Ship?
Ah, no, I'm trying to think if I've even heard of it. You'll have to describe it to me a bit.
So Ghost Ship is a little kind of forgotten about horror film from the early 2000s. It stars Gabrielle Byrne and Julia, what's her name? Julianne Margulies from ER,
Oh
curly
yeah, the
hair.
good fight.
Yeah, it also
Yeah,
so it also has it has a couple of other actors. Isaiah Washington is also in it, and they basically
right.
play this crew that salvage lost ships. So they go out to abandoned ships and they salvage, what they can from them, metal parts, things like that. Sometimes they bring the ship back to port. So they are going to this ship that is unfortunately haunted. And when they get to the ship, they all have like weird experiences. But the opening of the movie actually shows you the final massacre on the ship that caused the ship to become abandoned. And it opens, it's the 1940s or 20s, some time between the 1920s and the 1940s. And there's this beautiful party going on, and everyone's dancing, and there's this beautiful music playing, and there's this little girl played by Emily Browning, and she's wandering through the crowd, and this old gentleman sees her and is all like, come dance with me. So she's dancing and everyone's having a great time, and then all of a sudden these wires start to like kind of spring loose, and this wire comes down from like one of the ship's poles or something and slices through every single person on the dance floor, just goes straight through them. And the little
Okay.
girl's just kind of standing there, and she's holding the guy by the waist, and the wire has missed her because she's so short. And then around her, everyone starts to bisect and vivisect and fall apart.
Okay.
The guy that she's hugging, she looks up at him and his face kind of falls apart. And then,
Oh,
so I think it's called like below the waist, the actual scene, because in one spell movement, everyone on this ship deck dies. and this poor little
Okay.
girl is left in this sea of like wriggling, squirming bodies and people trying to like crawl towards their legs and people's arms flailing about. And then when we end up getting a flashback to this scene about 3/4 of the way through the movie, which gives you the explanation for the haunting and what's actually going on. And I won't give too much away in case you do want to see it, but we get this glorious flashback to that massacre again with this great rock music, and you get to see what happens afterwards. And the girl is running through the ship screaming as people are dying around her. And they end up hanging her. And again, children in horror films that die can be very, very unnerving. That opening scene that just goes from, like I said, this beautiful party where everyone's celebrating and everyone's drinking champagne to literally everyone being trisected is just, it is,
Mm.
again, it's one of those opening scenes that really grabs you. The movie itself, not fantastic. It's a bit plotting, and I know they had some script issues where the script ended up being something very different than the actors thought it was going to be originally. But that opening scene, like if we ever do a top 10 opening scenes, like that would probably be in my list because
Mm.
it's just such a great impact. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. So that is my number 5, The Ship Party Massacre from Ghost Ship.
Okay, so I'll look out for that one. Definitely
Mhm.
want to at least check out. Okay, so top five for me. And we have our first crossover because at my number five, I've also gone for the Black Christmas barb scene,
I had
the
a feeling
barb
that
death.
would be on your list. Very nice.
No, that would come up on mine. Yeah, I didn't actually think of that as a crossover, but obviously we really agree with that, like the quality of it. As I said, as you said, the sort of dark irony of him using like Christmas ornaments and the whole cozy setting, the way it's shot. You've got obviously that classic, similar to like in the original Halloween, where you've got like the camera, the point of view shot creeping down the hallway, like following him, and just the intercuts, cutting back and
Mm-hmm.
forth, just about the right amount of time to like build up the suspense. And it's pretty much a directing masterclass up to like obviously the shot of the final girl Jess downstairs actually smiling when they come to the end of their performance. And it's obviously she's so unaware, so naive to what's happening upstairs to her
Mm-hmm.
sort of friend. And it's also stuff like the shot of him where he's actually stabbing Barb, where you see his face in silhouette. I mean, obviously, it's one of those movies where when it's revealed who the killer is, it's not necessarily that big a mystery anyway. But
Mm.
at at that point in the film, they're still sort of playing it up as like a whodunit style thing. So
Mm.
you only really see his face in silhouette sort of thing. So I do like actually the way they keep the suspense of who he is during that scene as well. So, and the cows, as I said. So we've pretty much covered it, but it's a great scene. It is a
It
classic.
is.
So that's number
Very cool.
five.
Yeah, no, I had a feeling that would pop up on both of our lists because when we review Black Christmas, we spent like a good 5 minutes just talking about that scene. So definitely, I'm happy to see it on both of our lists. Very cool. So my number 4 is from a franchise that you have already mentioned. It's from the Final Destination franchise. It is from the first film. Now it is actually the probably the least creative death in the film, but the way that it's filmed and the way that it's shot and comes out of nowhere puts it on this list. So my number 4 is Terry getting hit by the bus in Final Destination. And the reason I've gone with that one, even though it's not a very creative kill, is because it comes out of nowhere. It is one of those kills that you just don't see coming. The build up to the scene is Alex and Claire are at a cafe. They're hanging out and chatting, and then Terry and her boyfriend, whose name I can't remember, but it's Jack from Dawson's Creek,
Dawson.
Carter. They come over and they start talking to Alex, and then the teacher comes out, and they're all standing around and yelling at each other and kind of arguing about the events of the plane. And then Terry gets really pissed off and is all like, Carter, if you want to spend the rest of your life worrying about Alex, and that's fine, but if you're going to do that, then you can just drop fucking dead. And then boom, that
That's
bloody
great.
train bus comes out of nowhere, and it's just the shock of it. Like, I remember the first time I watched the movie, I was like, did that just happen? What is going on? And I discovered that when they did this movie, when they ran this movie for test audiences, they found that the audience was so shocked after that death that they actually had to put in some filler scenes. So they actually, they go from that scene to a shot of Alex dropping an aspirin into water, and then Clear dropping an aspirin into water, and they actually did that so that the audience would have time to kind of recover from Terry's death and kind of compose themselves so that they could then go into the next scene and concentrate on the dialogue. So even though Final Destination has some really creative deaths, and there were some other deaths that I did consider putting on this list just for the sheer creativity and, intensity of them, just the out of nowhere nature of Terry's death and the way that you like literally just do not see it coming, and it's so sudden and it's so final and it's just so, that's it, she's gone, that I really love that scene. And every time I rewatch the movie, even though I know it's coming, it still kind of gets to me a little bit because it's just so well done. So that's my number 4. Terry gets hit by a bus from Final Destination.
I agree. Yeah, it's a nice sort of contrast to some of the other kills, and obviously
Yeah.
to a certain point in that first movie. Obviously, the premise is a little bit out of the ordinary, but a lot of the kills actually they come up with like quite inventive ways for them to happen. But the actual kills themselves, I think they do keep reasonably simple in the first film. But
Yeah.
I agree with you. Yeah, I think that kill is a bit of a gut punch, and it's because of that line. Partly, I'd rather whatever the line was, I'd rather be dead.
Yeah.
And it's just, and then instantly, and you do feel for her because she's a
Yeah.
reasonably lot. I mean, if it had been, is it Carter the boyfriend?
Carter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if it had been him, because he was kind of a dick up to that point, you'd like,
Yeah.
okay,
You
screw
wouldn't
it.
really
But
care.
she
Yeah.
felt a bit more innocent and a bit more, likable. So you do actually feel for her. So yeah, no, it's quite a cool moment. That moment does sort of get me every time I sort of watch that scene. So fair enough. Okay. So my number 4 is again going to a classic, another 70s classic. Actually, same year as Black Christmas. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, and that's relevant because obviously we did the recent film the other day, and this is Pam's death. So this is sort of, I guess, in a way, the most iconic death, just because you've obviously got that shot of her walking down to the house. She doesn't know what awaits her because obviously her boyfriend's been killed in the house. She doesn't know that. So you get the slow walk down. And it's one of those, it's a bit of a pervy scene, but I think that sort of works for what they're going for because it has this voyeuristic type nature, which is definitely what they're going for with her. Just like, innocently looking for her boyfriend. They've obviously been flirting and stuff, and she takes a stroll to the house, not knowing what awaits her. And it's a really intense kill once you get inside the house. And there's something actually just sort of cold and disturbing about the room because it's all covered with like sort of silver foil and stuff like that. It sort of looks like they're in a sci-fi type movie, but there is something about that like display with the foil and that, and you've got all like the metallic type looking things. It does look very sci-fi, but it sort of looks very like disturbing. And also, then there's hardly any sounds in the scene. It's very like ambient type sounds. So I think that makes it all the more like cold and clinical and effective. And it's just the way you watch it play out because she obviously goes into the house first, starts looking around, and he just, Leatherface that is, of course, comes out of nowhere, grabs her from behind. And again, you get a sense of a struggle. And I think from the audience point of view, when you have to watch a character struggle, it actually makes the scene more traumatic and more tense. Whereas if they just kill them quickly, it's obviously not as intense. So it's to do with the voyeuristic nature of the scene. It's like we're at a distance, so we have to stand back and watch this and her struggling. And obviously you get like the build up and her just so emphatically, brutally getting dumped on that hook, that meat hook.
Oh, yeah.
They're definitely going for this because he's got the coat on and everything. So they're going for this idea of like Leatherface being like a butcher type thing. So it's
Yeah, it
like,
looks like an abattoir or something.
yeah, so
Mm.
she's like a piece of meat almost, the way she treated. It's also a really disturbing kill because of how long it actually goes for, like the way you follow it and it goes on and on. Again, a little bit of a story, a little bit of a suspense because
Mm.
she actually doesn't die there and then. She has to watch her boyfriend being, I think he uses like the chainsaw, and then you get another guy who comes along from the group later on, and he actually gets killed before Pam is officially like declared dead because I think he
Oh.
finds her in the freezer or something, and that's how she's finally killed. Like just when she shut the doors shut on her in the freezer, and she obviously freezes. So that's another thing. The way it's just extended like that definitely adds to the suspense. Sort of classic Leatherface, and
Mm.
as I said, it's so emphatic the way he just like slabs her down on the meat hook. So,
Very nice. Yeah, that hook scene is the one where people have talked about, yeah, like they have memories of seeing the hook go into her, but you actually don't. But it's done
mm,
in such a way that, yeah, you end up with that memory. Like I've said before, I've only seen this one once, so I don't remember it that well, but I do remember that hook scene, and I do remember that shot where he comes and grabs her from behind as she's trying to escape
yeah,
and she's screaming and struggling. It's a very iconic shot, so very good choice. I mean, if I'd seen the movie more than once, I might have something from it, but I just haven't been game enough to go back and rewatch it
sure.
since the first time. So maybe might be time for a rewatch to remind myself of just how terrifying that movie is. Be sleeping with the lights on when I rewatch it, but that's a very good choice. All right, so my number three is not actually like a very over the top or even that creative kill. It's a combination of the brutality of the kill, like the impact of the kill, and the fact that it happens to a character I really don't like. So this is a kill from the Halloween franchise, which we have covered all the movies. This is a kill from Halloween 2018. And this is good old Dr. Sartain getting his head stomped in by Michael Myers, which is
Okay,
just
yeah,
such. Now I
interesting
know the
choice.
Halloween franchise, yeah, it has a lot of great kills across all the movies, and I think that this head stomp may have been a reference to the head stomp in the Rob Zombie films. I'm not sure, but the Doctor, to me, I can't stand his character. I hate him. I
Uh,
think he's a shit Loomis stand-in. I don't like the fact that he's the one that brings Michael and Laurie back together. So when he died, I was very, very happy. And I think the build up to his death is also really fun because he's trying to get Michael to talk. He's trying to get Michael to
yeah.
say something. And he's lying on the ground, and Michael's walking over to him, silent and big and scary as always. And as he looks up to him, he's screaming, say something, say something. And Michael's just like, nah, just kind of looks at him. And then just that head stomp. Like, I remember when I saw this in the cinema and that happened, I was just like, whoa, did he really just stomp some dude's head? And the fact that it's just one stomp, in the zombie film, it's several stomps, which kind of takes the effect out of it. But just that one single stomp squishes this guy's head. Character I hate just died, which is always great. But I think, again, that really emphasizes like Michael as a terrifying, almost otherworldly, superhuman type of character that he can just coldly and calculatedly just stomp the shit out of some dude in one stomp. So just a combination of the impact and the single stomp and the head splatter and the fact that it's a character that I really hate, that gets my number three spot. Dr. Sartain gets his head stomped on by Michael in Halloween 2018. Not too much to go into with the scene. It's just a really fun scene for me.
Okay, yeah, good choice. I mean, that's quite interesting. I wouldn't have called that one appearing, so yeah, interesting
Yeah,
choice.
that one's more kind of just like a little pet favorite, it's just
Yeah,
character
sure.
I hate, plus a really particular. It's just, yeah, I don't think it's one that a lot of people would have on their lists. And when I was doing my list and ended up listing it so high, even I was quite surprised. But there's something about the brutality and the impact of it that I just really love.
Yeah, that son of a bitch had it coming.
He really did.
That's that's the other side to some of these kills sometimes, because obviously so far on our lists we've had a lot of ones we actually do care about the
Yeah.
protagonist, or at least we're sort of interested, and we kind of are
Mm.
rooting for them to survive. So that's why the kills are effective in a different
Yeah.
way. But that's another part of horror movies. Sometimes you do have really annoying characters, and you
Hmm.
definitely get a thrill out of seeing them, especially if they've been around quite a long time on the screen, eventually just getting their comeuppance.
Hmm.
So that's
Yeah.
definitely a part of a classic horror movie kill as well. So
Hmm.
so that's why that's quite a good choice, I would say. Okay. So my number three, which is a favourite of yours, and again I'm sort of sticking to the classic horror franchise, and we've got some whisper to a scream. Whisper to a scream. That's the song almost certainly goes. Scream, the original Scream, 1996. You can probably guess which kill I'm going to go for. I think it's, well, it's the Tatum garage door.
I thought
That's the
so.
one. Yeah.
Hmm. Very
So,
nice.
apart from the fact that it's an all-round great kill, the way it's shot and everything, and the back and forth how it plays out, the build-up. Another thing I'll say, which is a reason I've gone for it, is I think an effective horror kill is also one that it's to do with its placement in the movie, and
Mm.
again, the stakes that it creates, how important the character is and stuff, because this is quite late in Scream the movie, but you've still got a good, like, whatever it is, 20 minutes, half an hour to go at this point. So it's
Mm.
not the very sort of end game. That sort of adds to it because over the course of that movie, Tatum has been presented as like a major character. She's obviously Sydney's best friend. She's very sort of feisty, quite tough, has had like a good sort of character like development and stuff. So it's one of those where you think potentially this character could make it to the end at the very least, or she could even survive the movie. And that's something which
Mm.
is kind of, there's a gag about in the scene, about, sequels, I want to be there.
Yeah.
So that sort of thing. But yeah, I think we are invested in Tatum in that sort of way where you think she could well end up in the final knockings of this movie with Sydney. That instantly makes it quite an impactful death at this point in the film where you've still got a while to go. And obviously, it creates stakes because it is someone we care about. It's Sydney's best friend, but it's a really distinct and again creative kill, the idea of using that garage door and just the visual of it, her going up and her literally the impact of her head like getting crushed in it, the sparks, you see the blood, little bit of
Hmm.
blood, you get her hanging there, which is very sort of dramatic. Obviously, Ghostface then casually goes back to the party, but the whole build up of it is obviously really great with the back and forth. But yeah, just the flow of it, the way it sort of slowly builds, and you get obviously some great like pop culture references in there, like I spit on your garage,
I
which
love that reference.
that's
That was such a
absolutely
great one.
brilliant, and Call It
Hmm.
Casper, that's a rap, and stuff like that.
Hmm.
It's so sharp with that humor, but yeah, it doesn't take you out of the scene. It sort of feels like it's sort of part of Tatum's character. It's really creative kill. It's really well directed. You've got some good humor in there. I think it has a bit of everything, and as I said, because it's a character we really care about too and invested in, it adds that little bit of impact as well. So that's my number three.
Fantastic choice. Definitely agree. It's such a great scene, and we all know how much I love Scream. So
Yeah.
definitely I'm on board with that. It's a great choice. So moving on to my number two, I am still in the Halloween franchise here, but I'm going all the way back to the original Halloween from 1978, and I'm going to go with a very iconic death from Halloween. I'm going to go with the opening death where little baby-faced Michael Myers murders his older
Of
sister
course.
Judith because it's such an iconic scene. This is one of those scenes where like the direction is just perfect. So you have that beautiful point of view shot of this unknown killer. You know, again, it's kind of a bit of that voyeurism that you were talking about with Texas Chainsaw. We see the killer looking in the windows and spying on Judith, making out with her boyfriend. We get that whole sex equals death kind of, you know, juxtaposition that sprung up with the slashes. And you see the killer go into the house, reach for the drawer, you know, put the mask on, this wonderful, creepy point of view shot. And then you see him slowly go upstairs to the sister as she's sitting brushing her hair. And then just that look as she turns around and, you know, he starts stabbing her. And we actually see from the killer's point of view him killing this girl. And we still don't know any motives or any motivation. We don't know who this killer is. We don't know any circumstances. All we know is that we are inside the mind of the killer watching as he stabs this innocent girl to death. And then you have that brilliant reveal as he walks downstairs and the cops come up and they're like, Michael? And all of a sudden they pull the mask off and you have that pan away to see this angel-faced little 6-year-old in this clown costume carrying this massive ass butcher's knife that he's just used to kill his sister. And it's such a great establishment for Michael as a character. You know, you get this, it's like, you're like, what is so wrong with this little 6-year-old that he's just gone and committed this horrifying murder? And you have that beautiful slow pan away where it shows that the adults are also so in shock that they don't know what to do. They just kind of stand there staring at this baby-faced little child who has just committed this horrible murder. And it's become such an iconic opening and such an iconic scene, you know, and that clown costume. And, you know, I know you don't like Halloween Kills, but they have the reference to the clown costume in there when you see little Michael in the window, because, you know, every Halloween fan knows that costume and knows how iconic that opening scene is. And I think it's so interesting that that scene puts us in the killer's mind. Like, our perspective is from Michael's point of view, not from the victim's point of view. We're actually seeing through the killer's eyes and have this sense of voyeurism and almost like we're committing the crime with him. And it's just such an effective and eerie and just atmospheric opening scene and such a great kill. Again, because it's like 1978 and the Halloween films weren't that gory, it's not about the gore, it's about the horror of that revelation that this killer that we've been watching, that we assume is a grown killer, is actually a little 6-year-old boy who is just so innocent looking. And that juxtaposition, again, like we talked about with Black Christmas, of the innocence with, you know, with the horror, it just works so well. So that's my number 2. Michael kills his older sister in Halloween 1978.
Great choice. And again, obviously you're working on a bit of a theme, because that opening scene really sets the tone for the movie.
Yeah.
It's so important in getting that movie off to the right sort of start. And
yeah, it's
I think because
fantastic.
partly, obviously, it's a great scene anyway, but partly because it's the opening scene and it sort of throws you in there. I think that's partly why everyone remembers it. So again,
such a great impact. Yeah.
Era contender when you're talking about great opening scenes. Okay, my number 2. And so this is the first time I've repeated a franchise here, gone back to a franchise the second time. So it's my second kill scene from a Nightmare on Elm Street film. This time I've gone for the original from 1984, A Nightmare on Elm Street. So I'll see if you can guess which kill scene I've gone for.
Okay, this is probably unfair because I'm guessing it's one of two. It's either, I'm thinking it's either going to be Tina's death on the ceiling or Johnny Depp's death in the bed.
It's Tina's. It's the
Tina's death. Yes. Great scene.
Yeah, so once again, and actually that follows on nicely because, of course, I'd scream at number 3, Wes Craven again. So really, you're seeing Wes Craven at the top of his game with those two choices. And I think, obviously, when he was on top of his game, very few horror directors could touch him. So these are great examples. And again, I think it's because that scene's quite early in the film as well. Like, it's the first major kill of the film, at least, and it's the first time you see Freddy properly. So once again, we've talked about like this classic tradition of like building up slowly to like the appearance of the monster. So that's definitely something that scene does, where there's plenty of mood and suspense as we build up to him. And obviously it's Tina's scene, dream itself, that we actually see him in for the first time. And you've got that they're down like an alley, which looks very like dimly lit, haunted, creepy. You've got obviously that weird sort of shot where he appears in silhouette, and he appears to have like massive sort of arms. That's quite an unsettling shot in itself. And it slowly reveals like his face. And he gives chase, and it's a really sort of suspenseful chase. You know, him getting to her, and him just, as she's like waking up, trying to come out of the dream, just him scraping her and stabbing her. It just looks so cool, like the back and forth. And obviously you've got the reaction of her boyfriend, Rod, I think his name is, who's like going crazy trying to get her, but at the same time his reaction is like, what the fuck is going on, because I can't see this guy. And that plays quite nicely into the plot later on, when they obviously they think he's done it, sort of thing, so he actually gets locked up because there's no like physical evidence. But it does look really effective, you know, like just her fighting with this invisible thing. It's like under the covers, and it feels like a real struggle where she's like hitting the walls back and forth. So it's again a really good slow burn sort of kill, and she finally gets flung up to the ceiling, and again there's more back and forth, and eventually she's like slowly gutted. And once again, practical effects, practical blood effects look so much better, so much more effective, and she slowly dies. And once again, as I was saying, because of the placement of the kill, because it is the first, I think it's the first kill of the film, full stop, but it's certainly the first major kill. And it's just like a calling card. It's like, this is what this film is going to be, and this is what the character of Freddy Krueger is going to be. It sums up his whole threat, his whole personality perfectly. And you've got some great lines in there. I mean, the one I'll pick out is just where she says, "Please God," and Freddy shows her knives, his knife thing. It's like,
God.
This is God, and evil laugh, all the rest of it that you associate. But just the fact he makes a point of showing her the knife. This is God. It's really great stuff. So pretty much all the kills are great in that first nightmare, but that is my pick of it, definitely.
Yeah, I that is a great scene. Like, just even now when I watch the film, just that shot of her like on the ceiling being like thrown around by an invisible force while her boyfriend is completely helpless to do anything because you can't see this force. And I think it's fantastic. Yeah. And then, like you said, you get that reveal of Freddy in the dream. The "This is God" line is one of my favorite like shots of Freddy, and one of my favorite lines, because it was before he started to get a little bit cheesier, when he was like just really terrifying. So that's a great choice. It's a great scene. It's so atmospheric. It's so creepy. And, you know, lots of really great effects, and just seeing her being dragged around on the ceiling, it's really scary, really effective. My sister and I saw the film in the cinema a couple of years ago, and just seeing that scene on the big screen was like really intense. So that's a really good choice. I love it. Well, do you want to have a guess at what my number one is? Because you know me pretty well, and you know what scenes I like, and you know what I haven't listed yet. So what would you think my number one might be?
Well, because I assumed it would be one we might have in common, but I don't know if you would go for that. I'm assuming you might go for something from Scream, so I think I'll go with the garage kill.
It is. Tatum in the garage door is my favorite horror scene. Look, you covered a lot of it. It's got a great build-up. Tatum's a great character. I love her snarky back and forth with the killer. I love the, what is this? I spit on your garage. Like, that's a great line. But what I really love about this scene is the creativity of it. Like, I mean, who would have thought to use a cat door as a
Yeah.
as a
Okay.
murder weapon. It is, and I know that in the original script, she was actually supposed to get into a fist fight with the killer. And then when they were on set, I think it was Craven's assistant was the one that suggested using the cat door instead. And then they worked it out when they were on set. So it was something that like sprung up from someone's like idea. And ironically, Rose McGowan could actually fit through that door. They had to nail her shirt to the door so she wouldn't go all the way through. But just the creativity of it, but also the horror of it. You know, you're stuck in this thing that you can't escape. You can see your doom coming towards you, you know, and you can
Sure.
see Tatum screaming and being like, no, no. And then just that crunch as she hits the top of the garage, and the way her body kind of just folds up. You know, they must have gotten a mannequin
Yeah.
because you see her head kind of like, you know, smush up. And it's just such a great scene. Like you said, I really agree with you about how it ups the stakes, you know, because like you said, you are getting towards the third act of the movie. You're thinking maybe Tatum will make it through. And Tatum herself is such a great character. I was actually just saying this morning to Stephen that if I could bring back one character, like resurrect one character from the Dead in the Scream franchise, it would be Tatum, because I love Tatum and just everything about that scene, the build up, the execution, the fact that Tatum doesn't go down without a fight. I love when she ducks down and she flips Ghostface over her back, when she
Yeah.
starts, you know, throwing the beers at him, and she's like, fuck her, and just starts hurling the beer bottles at him.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's just, yeah, that's great. The
That's
whole
good shit.
scene
Yeah.
is just brilliant. So the creativity, the fact that it's from my favorite horror film, the fact that it's one of my
Sure.
favorite characters, everything about the garage door is, it's just a great scene. And yes, it is my number one choice for horror, on-screen horror kills. Tatum getting smushed in the cat door is my number
Yeah.
one.
I can't blame you. Yeah, it's a fantastic death, truly original, and for all the reasons we said. And yeah, just to add to what you said about if you could bring her back one character, and I mean, screw all this. Let's bring Sue back and all this speculation.
Yeah,
They're still going on about it online. I mean, it's
I
amazing.
know.
They're still trying to will it to happen. No, no. I mean, if there's one person, and I'm not even saying I could justify bringing Tatum back because damn, you would have to explain it. But
Yeah, you
even
would.
so, yeah, it's not a supernatural film, folks. Remember that. But I'm with you. If there was one I could somehow bring back from the dead from the previous films, it would
Hmm.
definitely be her. So, okay, so on to my number one, which is. I think definitely I've gone for like the massive pop culture like phenomena and influence it's had on cinema and all the rest of it, as well as just being like a perfect scene in itself. So I really should get a knife out to do it, but
I was
I'll
gonna
sort
say, are you going for
yeah, basically.
yeah.
Basically the film that Friday the 13th sort of ripped off with the whole the sound that you hear when
Yeah.
Jason's in the woods and lurking. So it is of course the shower scene from Psycho. I
Yeah,
had to go
very
with it.
good.
As I said, it's so iconic, it's so perfectly shot, and it changed cinema, it changed horror
It
cinema.
did.
So once again the impact is so important, and how many times it's been reproduced or referenced throughout. Because there was, I can't remember what it was, but I think it's a film we did recently. There was a scene in, oh, I think it was Valentine, wasn't it, where there was a tease of there being a death in the shower, and
Yes,
in the
yes,
end,
there
like the
was.
character actually comes out, and she dies later. But
Yeah.
just something like that. They're definitely like nodding to Psycho in this idea, then, and obviously something like I Know What You Did Last Summer, like the end scene to
Hmm.
that, definitely
Yeah.
is in Psycho. So it's just so many things over the years. You've got, as I said, the distinct sound of like the violin, which is just so perfect because it's like a
It
static
is.
noise in itself, and
Hmm.
that's obviously influenced different sort of like noises that different films use for suspense. Like obviously, as I said, Friday the 13th, the score of Psycho really that's been reproduced and it's sort of sometimes ripped off, but also sometimes just fondly pastiche. Something like
Yeah.
Reanimated does it very well. And as I said, just the whole thing. Janet Leigh's like reaction shot is perfect. The way that's sort of framed. I think also it's that scene that shows you why it makes sense that the film is shot in black and white because the use of black and white makes it all the more like cold and clinical and
Yes.
suspenseful as she's like slowly dying in the shower. Obviously, great reaction scene. The build up to it again, there's this really slow, naturalistic type build up, and you generally probably when you're first watching it, I think you generally probably don't know quite where it's going. Like you suspect something's going to happen, but I don't think you can quite predict what. And
Yeah.
Lee's reaction is perfect, and the timing of it, the timing of the scream, and it's part of what we've been talking about bit on this video is then it's that idea of less being more and the psychology of it. And that's what Hitchcock does. It's not what you see, it's what you imagine sort of thing. And that's what he grasps because you actually don't see that much. You see a little bit of the aftermath. You see it's really cleverly cut around, and it's probably one of those things where because this is like the 60s and stuff, there is a limitation of what they could do and make it look realistic. So I think that's definitely partly why they cut around it. But again, he gets the psychology of it, then less is more. It's what you imagine sort of thing. Partly because it is such a perfect scene, which is so iconic, and I wouldn't change a thing about the scene, but it's also the added sort of cultural impact. All these decades later, it's like still referenced and talked about.
Oh yeah.
So perfect.
It's a great choice. Yeah. Plus, you also have the added bonus of like, we think that she's the main character and then she's killed off so early in the film. So you have that shock of like, oh my God, like anything can really happen now. And I really like, that it throws you off balance and you think, hang on, what are we going to do now that our main character is dead? But yeah, it's a very great scene. Love so many great references to the scene. So many movies and TV shows reference it. One of my favorite ones is actually from Charmed. There's an episode in season 2 where they're actually being stalked by horror movie villains, and Piper goes and hides in the bathroom, and then she kind of pauses and she's like, I'm being stalked by psycho killers and I hide in the shower. And so, she's just like, so yeah, just that's a great choice. Yeah, I had a feeling that might be your number one because I know how much you love Psycho and it's just such an iconic scene. So that's very cool. So we had 2 crossovers, and they were actually the 2 crossovers I thought we'd have. I actually was going to this. I'm like, I bet you we'll both have Black Christmas and we will both have Tatum. I thought you might have the Halloween opening scene as well, but I guess it's just not as like much of an impact on you as the other ones. So maybe an honorable mention.
Yeah, well, I think it will now, as well as I'm sort of kicking myself actually that then I didn't include the Carrie one. Yeah, that's definitely one. I think sometimes it's just you think of things in a different way, and sometimes you just forget that they class as like kill scene sort of thing.
Yes.
But it's obviously the Carrie one, when you said it, I was like, I probably should add that one, but
so that's an honorable mention for you. What else almost made the cut?
Honorable mention. Yeah, I do have a couple more. I have one from, like you had, but I do have one from Halloween, the original Halloween. And with that one, it is my favourite death of the movie. I've gone for Annie's death, in the car.
In the car? I had a feeling you were
I
gonna go
really
that
like
one.
that
Yeah.
one. The visual.
It's a
I like
great
the one
one.
Michael appears out of nowhere in the back. I like, how sort of dark and dusty it all looks, and kind of grimy, and obviously again there's a sense of a struggle and very sort of realistic the way it plays out, and just the visual of him like strangling her and her face pressed against the car window, that gives it an added sort of thing. Okay, so that's an honorable mention. That's definitely for me. I mean, I like all the kills really in that first Halloween movie, but for me, that probably is the best one. And my other honorable mention, and this is the one, as I said, which I came across again today, which I'd forgotten about, but it's a kill from The Omen, the original Omen from 1960.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah, which one?
you might know where I go, and it's the one with the window where it flies off the truck, And I think,
Oh,
yeah, I
mm.
think it's David Warner playing the character, and his head gets
Gets
decapitated.
decapitated.
And
Yeah.
and again, it's one of these things because the truck pulls up, and obviously supernatural stuff going on. So something randomly unclicks the brakes, so the car starts. Again, I think we're getting a little bit into Final Destination type territory here, but the truck, sorry, slowly sort of rolls towards him, and yeah, there's like a window on the back of the truck or whatever it is, and that comes flying off. And again, good use of like slow motion sort of like tracking shot type thing. And I also like the detail because obviously the blade like decapitates him, but his head actually like spins up and spins backwards. I really like that touch. And you've got just the stuff with him like falling into like the window backwards like his body. And then, I mean, not that the driver can do anything at this point. He's already a goner, but the driver just running towards him when he realizes. But that's a really cool scene. So that's an honorable mention. Okay. Any mentions? Any
Mm.
honorable mentions?
I have three that I wanted to mention that almost made it onto my list, but were just edged out. So one of them is Tina's death scene from Nightmare on Elm Street. I did almost put that on that because it is, like we were saying, it's such an intense scene and really shows you what like Freddy is capable of and what they're up against and like this force that is to be reckoned with. So you pretty much covered it when you spoke about it. It's just such a great intense scene, lots of gore, lots of atmosphere. So that one almost made it. There was another Final Destination death that almost made it. I was debating between this one and Terry, and I went with Terry because it's just such an impact. But the teacher's death, um, Miss Valerie, like her death in Final Destination is one of the most drawn out death scenes I've ever seen.
Oh
Like
yeah,
she
yeah.
gets first she like trips on the wire, then the knife falls into her, then the mug falls down and pushes the knife into her more, then the computer explodes and like goes into her neck, and then like her house explodes in a ball of fire. And it's like a 5 to 10 minute scene of her just getting one thing after another after another
Yeah,
after another.
that's brutal,
It's
isn't
such an
it?
intense scene. So
Yeah.
that one almost made it. I mean, the last one is another Fear Street one, and this is from the sheer creativity, and that is the bread slicer scene with Kate in the first movie, where Kate's head
Oh
goes
yeah,
through the bread slicer. Very
very
inventive
good
kill,
effect.
very gory kill. Apparently, the director had a whole argument with the prop manager because the prop manager was saying a human head is not going to go through a bread slicer. It's not strong enough. So they got a rock melon or a watermelon and sent the watermelon through the bread slicer, and it went through perfectly. So they were like, yeah, okay, this will work. But it's just
Yeah.
like I remember when I first watched that movie and it was getting towards Kate's death, and then all of a sudden you realize what the killer was going to do, and it was like, oh, is he really going to shove her head through that thing? And then yep, she goes right through the bread slicer, and then we get that beautiful shot of her head being like sliced up as
Yeah.
she comes out of the slicer. So the Berman sisters edged her out because there's more like substance to that scene,
Oh
the
yeah, more
tragedy of it
important
and
and stuff.
more
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
But Kate's the bread
That
slicer,
was good,
that
I
one's up
agree.
there with like the garage door as far as creativity goes. I'm like, that's a very creative kill. That's fantastic. So those are the three that almost made my list, but were just edged out by the ones that did end up on there.
Sure. Okay. Really good video again, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
again, how diverse, because we definitely
Hmm.
have some diverse tastes when it comes to horror movies in general. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's good. Something because yeah, definitely some of the stuff you mentioned. Yeah, I would like to take a look at some point. So
Yeah.
all sounds
We're
good.
definitely going to have to check out that Japanese film because I would really
Yeah,
like to see how someone gets eaten by a piano. That's got me
yeah.
intrigued, dude.
So that's definitely worth seeing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Very
We'll
cool.
definitely do that at some
Yeah.
point. Sounds good. Okay. So yeah, that's our lists. Let us know your thoughts on the lists in the comments below. Also, let us know what your list is. We would like to see that in the comments. So what would your top 10 horror kills be? I'll just take this chance to say that our next top 10 video will be going back to TV because we're flipping back and forth. So it's going to be top 10 TV oddballs slash nerds. That's going to be our next video. So look for that in the coming weeks. Hopefully that should be coming up very soon. So that's going to be interesting, definitely, because plenty to choose from TV over the years when it comes to that. Yeah, look out for that. That'll be our next top 10 video if you want to get thinking about your choices for that. But as I said, definitely let us know what you think of our lists for this one, but also, yeah, what your picks would be. Okay, thanks, guys. Look out for more top 10 lists soon. Also, look out for more horror movie reviews soon. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.